Welcome to this session at LiveWorks on simulation-driven design. My name's Mark Hindsbo, and I am the General Manager of Ansys' Design Business Unit. Before we begin on today's topic, I would like to say a big thank you to PTC for hosting this great event and giving us the opportunity to present. And of course, to all of you for joining us virtually. So why do we talk about simulation-driven design? For me, there's both a business and a personal aspect of that question. Let's take a look at the business value first. Most of you have probably seen a graph or a variation of this graph before. If not, I'm sure that you've experienced the effects that it's trying to depict in your own product development experiences. What it tells us is that while we only spend something like 18 to 15% of the total product lifecycle costs in the early stages of design, we are in fact locking in upwards of 85% of the total cost by the decisions that we make in those early stages. It also tells us that it is much cheaper and easier to fix issues early on than it is if we have to go correct them in the later stages of product development. Now, for over 50 years, simulation has helped bring insight into the engineering decisions that we make. In fact, it has been proven to accelerate development times by 9x while continually improving product quality. However, it has also traditionally been used as a validation tool towards the later stages of product development. And it should be intuitive that if we can bring the power of simulation up front in the design process to the left on this graph, before we have committed these 85% of total cost, that should have a great impact on our product development lifecycle. And that is in fact what we find. Mediafly and Ansys has been out taking a closer look at companies that have moved simulation up front in their development process and deployed it to a much broader share of their engineers. And what we find is that they gain benefit in three different areas: engineering productivity, product innovation, and product quality. Let's briefly take a look at all three. In terms of productivity, by deploying simulation to a broader set of engineers, these engineers are able to get insights much quicker and make design decisions much quicker. That translates into a faster development cycle and shorter time to market. And in turn, that translates into 26 to 30% reduction of total cost of development. Now that is real engineering productivity. But it's not just about faster time to market. It's also about innovation. Using technology such as real-time simulation allows you to evaluate a much broader design space. More ideation, more iterative design alternatives evaluated, that leads straight to more differentiated and competitive products delivered to the end customer. And last but not least, we also found that these companies make more first-time right design decisions. And that leads to a lowered cost somewhere between 19 and 33% of ensuring product quality. Now, hopefully these clear and tangible benefits have inspired you to take a closer look at upfront simulation. If so, the full results of this report will be available later this month to everyone at LiveWorks, and there'll also be an associated ROI calculator where you can evaluate the impact on your organization. It's this vision and this potential that has brought PTC and Ansys together. We are inspired by the products that you develop, and we believe that together we can give you tools that make those even better and even faster tomorrow. There's been quite some incredible breakthroughs the last couple of years in graphics, real-time simulation, generative algorithms, ease of use, that you'll hear much more about later in this presentation. But the punchline is that these breakthroughs finally lets us make this vision a reality. You'll hear from Brian Thompson why the unique combination of PTC and Ansys results in something where the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. PTC and Ansys are also two companies that share the same values. For instance, believing in an open set of products that can interoperate to the benefit of our customers, many of which are already customers of both companies. Now, I mentioned that there was also a personal reason. When I studied to be an engineer, simulation was the domain of specialists and required high-performance computing resources. Until very recently, that was still the case, and engineering today is largely taught the way it was decades ago. Yet my children are digital natives that create large virtual worlds at will that they can intuitively interact with. Product development should be exactly the same. You should be able to have full insight to the behavior of your designs immediately and virtually. That's what this partnership is about. With that, I'd like to hand over to my friend and partner at PTC, Brian Thompson, who will elaborate more on the benefit for design engineers of embedding Ansys' technology natively into Creo.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for that great introduction. My name is Brian Thompson. I'm the General Manager of PTC's Creo CAD business, and it's my pleasure to be with all of you here today at LiveWorks 2020. I'd like to start out by taking the graph that Mark showed of how costs get driven in the product development process over time and just shrinking that down to a simple chevron. I'd like to use this to make a point about our joint strategy from a technology standpoint to achieve simulation-driven design. What you see here is simulation is still depicted more towards the back end of the development process. And for many of you, I'm sure this is not a surprise and actually not all that unusual. It's not that you don't get value from simulation deployed this way. In fact, we see that companies that use simulation in any way still can get value from it. But there are definitely some challenges associated with applying simulation to the development process this way that Mark really, really well articulated. So we've got to talk about why it's so important for the technologies to be integrated together. One of the really, really important aspects of this is this interplay that gets created when simulation is used this way between the design engineers and the simulation experts. You get this cycle of feedback that can be created here between the design department and the simulation experts that, unfortunately, in the best case scenario will take hours, but more than likely will take days or even weeks. And that, of course, discourages the use of simulation until many of those cost-driving decisions that Mark mentioned have been made because the design engineer doesn't want to disrupt his or her workflow. And so that is the essence of why the technology strategy between PTC and Ansys is what it is. We want to bring these worlds together. So the design model, the simulation model are in fact the same model, and simulation feedback can be had throughout the entire development process. In fact, on here, I've completely eliminated the notion of a separate concept model and said, hey, let's have simulation feedback throughout the entire process. So the first place you're going to see this from PTC and Ansys together is with the deployment of Creo Simulation Live into the marketplace. This is PTC's integration of Ansys's discovery technology for the design engineer right there inside Creo, so they truly can get that instantaneous interactive feedback as they make their design decisions. So they know every step of the way whether a design change they have made makes the design better or closer to the design goals or worse or further away from the design goals. So really, really excited to provide this in the market. This is what we think will truly be an excellent foundation for driving simulation-driven design into the market. We're finally getting a technology into the hands of the design engineers that they can use, that can keep up with them. But you know what? We're not done there. We're actually also working on high fidelity, high accuracy simulation measures and solvers from Ansys in Creo as well that will take the foundation that the design engineer has developed with Simulation Live and also give that design engineer the option, the opportunity to do a high accuracy, high fidelity simulation, maybe more intended for final refinement and validation towards the end of the design process. We're also working on that in Creo together with Ansys. And that is why we're really excited about PTC and Ansys finally being able to deliver on this vision that's frankly been in the marketplace for decades for true simulation-driven design. That is the essence of our technology strategy together. And frankly, The best thing for all of you in the audience is for you to actually see it.